Hi, I'm Trankoalaty, and today we are talking about Animorphs. Number 7, The Stranger. This is Rachel's second book, released in April of 1997. It's the longest book I've read so far in the series. It's 163 pages. Rachel is turning into a bear on the cover, and the image inside is of a bear, a gorilla, and a tiger in an elevator. So before reading this, I have absolutely no idea what this one could be about, but I've already got a few things to say. First is that I found that my copy is a first printing, and the last book was not. I learned that because this book only has the previous books as the, check out these other books from the author, as opposed to the other one having multiple. That's because it was printed later, even though it was the same type of cover. Second thing I vaguely recall Rachel being a bear, so I'm excited to see a new morph. Oh, and before I forget, here's the little flipbook animation in the corner of Rachel morphing throughout the book. The last thought is, don't elevators have weight limits? I feel like a tiger, a gorilla, and a bear, oh my, would be way over that limit and not very safe. Don't worry, this is explained later in the book. It's explained, and I just don't have the full knowledge of elevator. I didn't think of it. I am still a little bit recovering from my cold that set this video back by a week. I also started my job, and so I haven't had as much free time to make videos. The very last thing is that this book, I'm going to do these books in the order they came out, basically. So after this book, it will be the Megamorphs number 1. And then it will follow with number 8. I don't really have anything else to say. The little text here, I don't know what it's called, tagline, whatever it's called, it says, "This time there may be no way out." And since I know that there's books after this one, and so do you probably, I think we can safely assume that that might be a little bit exaggerated. Let's jump in and hear Rachel bear it all and tell us how they barely escaped. So the book opens with the usual world building, Yeerks, invasion, Animorphs. Rachel's dad had brought Rachel and her sisters to the circus. Rachel's a little older, so she brought Cassie as company while her dad hung out with the younger sisters. And while they were there, they had seen one of the trainers mistreating one of the elephants and shocking it with a cattle prod. And Rachel, she knows what it's like to be an elephant, so she was not too pleased about that. And so her and Cassie were sneaking into the elephant cages, where Rachel is going to morph into an elephant and scare the crap out of the trainer so that he doesn't abuse the elephants anymore. I think that this is a little bit not much to accomplish for the amount of risk that they're taking, but what do I know? So Rachel climbs into the elephant cages. They are not guarded. It's the 90s. That's how it is. It's a circus. That's how it is. And she morphs into an elephant. The other elephants are not the same kind as her, but that's totally cool. She hides behind them. She makes a big noise. She toots. What a noise do elephants make? I don't know. And the trainer comes running, and he goes into the cage, opens it up and goes in. And he's like, "Hey, you're not one of mine." And Rachel picks him up with her trunk and starts talking to him in thought speech, saying, "You need to stop abusing your elephants, and no more cattle prods." And he's like, but they're my property. And so she's squeezing him a little tighter, and she's like, "No." And he's like, "Okay, I won't be abusing my elephants anymore, crazy elephant person." So he agrees, and even though he thinks he's hearing things and going nuts, he agrees. And she just flings him 20 feet away, and he lands on one of the tents, and he's safe. It's fine. Of course, this is actually Rachel recapping the events to the rest of the group, giving us the obligatory character introductions as they are walking to go meet X in the forest behind Cassie's farm. Marco tells them that Tobias and him have found another entrance to the Yeerk pool. And it makes sense, obviously, that they wouldn't move the massive pool. They would just close the entrance that they had breached in the first book. He says that him and Tobias have been tailing, well, in Tobias's case, red-tailing the assistant principal, Mr. Chapman, for the last week. And Marco would follow him whenever he went inside anywhere, and Tobias would follow him from the air. So during their investigation, they found that people would go into the mall, the Gap, and go into the changing room, and they wouldn't come out. And they would later come out with the crowd at the movie theater. Always more people than went into the theater. Axe, of course, is like, we should attack. And the rest are like, no, not a good idea. We got wrecked last time. But he's all, no, the bigger the foe, the more the glory, or something like that. It's just like, dude, chill out. Think a little bit, you know? So they end up planning to go back to the pool, but only for recon, not for attack purposes. They want to find the Kandrona, the mysterious thing that gives the Yeerks their sustenance. Axe said it doesn't actually have to be at the pool. It would be anywhere from like a car sized to like the size of a barn. But it could be pretty much anywhere and have the Kandrona rays beamed in. Very convenient. They know that the Yeerks have at least one on the mothership, but shuttling people, they know that the Yeerks have at least a pool and the resources on their mothership, but shuffling people back and forth to space just wouldn't be very feasible. So if they can destroy the one that they find here, maybe they can deal enough damage, and, you know, if the Yeerks don't have a spare, they do a lot of damage. I'm not a huge fan of this plan at the moment, but, you know, it's something to go with. Like, why would the Yeerks not have a spare? You know what I mean? Like, of course they're going to have it. Why would you not? Why would you have such a glaring weakness right there? Like, oh, you killed the one thing that we needed, and we didn't have a backup. You gotta have a backup. Okay, actually, I did take some notes here. Maybe if you've worked anywhere before, maybe the invasion is like companies on Earth. They just don't give you the resources that you need, and they just tell you to make it work. Like somebody out there is like, we need 20 bug fighters and 400 soldiers and 200 Yeerks and 400 Dracon beams, and then someone else is like, you get 5 bug fighters and a pack of breath mints, figure it out. It's like Tony Stark did it in 2 days with a toothpick, like, you know, except in this case it would be more like Visser 1 did it in 3 days with 4 breath mints, figure it out. So Rachel goes home after they're done making their plan of reconnaissance. Rachel gets home, finds her mom is not making dinner because her dad is coming over, and she knows that's not a good thing because her dad's never come over since the divorce. So he brings in some takeout Thai and tells them what he was supposed to tell them when he brought them to the circus, but he for some reason did not do that. He is being offered his dream job in another city, many, many miles away. Rachel is upset and she goes to her room, and her dad comes in and he's like, and not just am I getting this job offer, I want you to come with me. Rachel specifically, because she's old enough. Her younger sisters aren't old enough to make the choice. They'll stay with their mom. But Rachel, she could go see a new city, and there's a really famous gymnastics coach there that, you know, maybe she could get in with that gymnastics coach. And mostly I thought this scene was just kind of meh. Rachel's thinking about like the opportunity and all, but then like, what about the Animorphs? And in my mind, it just does not make much sense to even consider moving and just giving up the fight, especially for Rachel and especially with like her friends. But then again, I'm not the typical person. So, but then it got to the end of the scene and her dad is leaving and he's like, I love you. And Rachel started crying. And I almost started crying, and I almost just started tearing up, but no, not today. And so I think it's interesting that Rachel is the tough one. I don't think that's right. The tough one. But so far, both of her books have been the ones that hit me in the emotions. So obviously, Rachel can't sleep that night because of all the feelings. And either way, she's going to hurt one of her parents. And one of the ways she'd be like giving up the invasion fight. So she can't sleep. She opens her window, she morphs into an owl, and she flies out. She's just flying and thinking about like, maybe she could have a normal life, and what would that even be like? And everyone expects her to be the strong and brave one. She's actually conflicted about going and leaving it all behind. Personally, I think we all know that she won't do that, but like, what would you do? Like, I I think I would choose to stay with the larger portion of my family and friends than move to an unfamiliar place where I don't know anybody and have no connections, especially if I was part of a rebellion. But I guess I can see the appeal, honestly. Other than the war part, I can't relate to that part yet. But I can relate to like escaping all the stress and stuff like that. So Rachel flies and she finds the tree where Tobias perches on at night and scares the crap out of him because owls are scary. So obviously she was gonna like talk to Tobias and like tell him about how she's feeling and what her dad had offered and stuff like that. But since he doesn't have to deal with any of that, she kind of started to feel bad and didn't bring it up at all. Obviously, he knew something was going on, but he asked, he's like, are you okay? What's going on? And she's just like, nope, I'm fine, and wouldn't tell him. And said that she was going to go to the zoo and get more firepower. Tobias said she should go home, but she flew away and she did go to the zoo. She goes to the grizzly exhibit, finds them sleeping unmorphs, and acquires the larger of the two. The whole time she's thinking about how everything is going to change when her dad moves away, and none of them can plan for the future with the war the way that it is, and she doesn't want to have to be the strong one all the time. And for some reason, this reminded me a lot of like meltdowns. Like all the tiny little problems are blurring together with the big things, and you can't make sense of any of it, and it just overwhelms you until you have a shutdown or meltdown. At least that's what it feels like to me sometimes. I'm not in a war against aliens, but like, you know, if I was, you could add that to my problem plate and I would melt down even worse. So the next day, they all meet up at the mall. They're going to morph into roaches, wait for someone to go into the pool via the changing room. So they all went into the changing room, morphed, or in Axe's case, unmorphed and morphed again, and left their clothes there. Jake goes in there last. He collects all the clothes and puts them in a storage locker so that they can get them later. He morphs. He just sacrifices his clothes to that changing room. They don't have to wait long. They see somebody go into the changing room. They follow them through the secret door. And Rachel spends the next chapter talking about the Yeerk pool as they descend the walkway behind the person. They can't see it with their roach bodies, but she talks about how it was in the first book and how horrible it was and the way that people would react when they realized that they were free. And some of the collaborators just wandered, but the others would, like the people who weren't collaborators, would cry or beg or try to fight and get taken to cages. And it's all really dark the way she's talking about it, as it would be. They make it to the bottom, into the cave. They follow the scent of food into buildings because they don't know where anything is, but they're following food because they figure maybe one of those buildings they can unmorph in or something like that. So they follow the scent. They crawl through some cracks. And they're inside. They're on a linoleum floor, and they sense a lot of people. So they're going to go find a table, hang under it, and see if they can hear anything while they're there. Before they can do that, a taxon tongue, a big long old taxon tongue, has snatched them up and starts to eat them. I guess they have big long tongues like a frog or a lizard does. So they all start to demorph, but they weren't trying to. They all just are like, I'm unmorphing, but it's not me. They've unmorphed into a lunchroom with lots of people around. There's the taxon that tried to eat them. There's also two Hork-Bajir guarding... Hork-Bajir. There's two Hork-Bajir guarding the entrance of this building as well. Or exit, depending on how you want to look at it. And they didn't know what to do, so they just ran out. And everyone and everything in the building was frozen in time. Like that scene in X-Men at the mall. Or like that scene in X-Men at the mansion. They exit the building and the same thing has happened outside. Everything is frozen. This is the point where I realized, I was like, oh, is this the Elemist? And I remember him as being like, sort of like a magic trickster. Like, I know that one of the chronicles is the Elemist Chronicles. I've not read it. I don't know anything about it. I don't remember much else about the character though. I do remember him as lots of magic, and I for some reason remember him with mischief. So I imagine him. I remembered him as kind of like a Loki character, or like this one character in Gargoyles. Wasn't there a like trickster god character in Gargoyles? Anyways, everything is frozen, but one person. Tobias is here, and he's human. He said he was just flying along, and then all of a sudden he's here. They all start to hear a voice from like everywhere or nowhere, and it's in their head. And it's like, no, I'm not a threat, Rachel. Aximile has started to guess what I am. And Ax says, it's the Elemist. And then he appears out of the air and looks like a Dr. Manhattan as an elf. And he says he is the Elemist. So I was right. And he also says he isn't a threat. Ax is like, I know you're kind. And the Elemist is like, only the fairy tales your people told. Ax says that the Elemist are like a really powerful thing, being, creature, alien, and they're like everywhere all at once. And they can destroy planets and cross light years in an instant, and like they can freeze time even. And that gets me wondering though, if you can freeze time, does that mean you freeze it for the entire universe? Because otherwise, wouldn't you have this like weird frozen radius type thing, but then like stars and planets are still moving through space. So if you froze just like this room I'm in right now, the rest of the house would still be moving with the Earth, wouldn't it? So you'd have to freeze the whole Earth. But then if you froze the whole Earth, you'd have to freeze the whole solar system because that's moving. Like, don't want to think about that too much. And also, how does that affect everything that isn't frozen, touching the things that are frozen? Okay, never. No more thinking, no more thinking. The Elemist says that he brought them all here to decide the fate of the human race. Like, we haven't had enough problems with an alien invasion. He says that the Elemist don't interfere with others except when they are facing extinction, like the humans are. At least this Elemist thinks the planet is pretty, and then he takes them on this, like, immersive Planet Earth VR tour and starts showing them all the different biomes, and they see the deserts and the oceans and the plains. And the Elemist says our planet has a variety like few others, and humans are primitive but capable of understanding. So after the VR tour, they're back in the Yeerk pool cave, and the Elemist says humans are going to be extinct, and the only ones left will be human controllers. Which, are they really extinct if they're human controllers? I guess. Whoa. Do the Yeerks breed? Like, do they breed their hosts to make new hosts? Would humans make good hosts for fast breeding? It takes us a long time to make our young big and stuff, right? The Elemist says humans are going extinct, only human controllers left. I guess that doesn't count. The Yeerks are going to win, and the Andalites aren't going to save the day. So he says that the Elemist are offering to take them, their families, and some select species to an Earth-like planet where they can continue to evolve naturally, but it has to be a free choice. The alternative is that they continue to fight a war that he says is already lost. I might be reaching, but I think I know what they're going to decide by the end of this book. So, if yes, they get teleported instantly to this new planet. If no, everything goes back to the point where time froze. They're all obviously upset, of course. Ax says it's what the Elements do. They give you this false choice and claim it was made freely. And so they start talking it over, and Tobias is immediately like, no. And he says he doesn't like the Elements using them and manipulating them and everything. Rachel is also like, no. And Ax is like, well, I'm not from here, so I'm not going to get a vote. Cassie votes yes, and Marco also votes no. So the no's have it. And while they're all talking, Jake and Rachel exchange a glance, and they see this drop shaft tube behind the building, or near the building that they had come out of. And it's going up, and they can tell because there's a person who's currently in the middle of going up. But they're frozen in space. Their hair isn't like flying upwards, so they're probably ascending. They can use that as an escape if they can survive the tongue of the taxon. So Cassie is still trying to rationalize it as the greater good. And Rachel starts to think about how she could save her family and then bring them all to this sanctuary planet. Cassie says she'll vote however everyone else does for the moment. And Jake says he doesn't believe that the Elements can actually tell the future because otherwise he wouldn't be able to give them the choice because that wouldn't really be an option, would it? So he votes no. So everyone votes no. And before he can even finish saying, like, I think you have our answer, time is unfrozen. They're back to being roaches. They're in the middle of being eaten by a taxon. So they all start unmorphing as they're being swallowed. And Ax unmorphs a little bit quicker and uses his tail to slice open the taxons so that they stop suffocating. They're still in the middle of a cafeteria full of people. Luckily, those people were stunned for a second there. But immediately, well, maybe not immediately, pretty quickly, they start chasing them. Our gang get up and start running for the door. But they're going to morph into something more deadly so that they can make it out. I thought it took them minutes to morph, though. Like, they're going to be dead long before they can finish. But hey, no. It's fine. Rachel starts morphing into the bear, but her and Axe get cut off from the rest of them, and they made it to the drop shaft, but, she didn't quite yet. She yells for Jake to run. At this point, I'm thinking, the Yeerks must know at this point that they are humans, right? Like, they just unmorphed in front of all those people, and Rachel's screaming to Jake to run as like, Jake, run! So like, they must know. She finishes morphing into the bear while Axe is doing his best to hold off the Hork-Bajir. The human controllers are a little bit less like wanting to take Axe on. Rachel is a bear. Jake comes back as a tiger and fought off however many it took to get them. They make it to the drop shaft, but Rachel doesn't really explain how. She says it was all just a big blur and she doesn't know how it happened. She was just in a blind rage. Doesn't know if it's her or the bear or both or anything. But she was like kind of attacking like the tiger that was like pushing her down and pushing her away and stuff. So they're all unmorphing while they're in the drop shaft. And Axe is trying to remorph into a human, but he's having trouble. And here they finally say that it actually takes a lot of energy to morph. And it's really exhausting. So having to do it back to back to back is really taxing. And I feel like they alluded to that before, but they never actually said it. So, like, I'm glad that they did, because now I don't have to be wondering, like, why don't they just morph and morph and morph? So, the drop shaft led them to the base of the water tower. Somehow, they disabled the 2 guards that were there. They didn't elaborate on that at all. And then they all go home. Didn't elaborate on that at all. And Rachel falls asleep and woke up in the morning to her alarm. I don't think there's any elaboration needed there. Her mom is like, you came in at like 9:30 barefoot wearing your leotard. You're still wearing it. Are you okay? If you have problems, you can talk to me. And Rachel's like, I don't have any problems, and just starts giggling. I don't know if it's because of like how absurd it would be to like tell her mom about an invasion and a new alien and stuff like that when her mom is just like thinking it's a normal day. Well, eventually her mom is like, well, okay, whatever. Tonight, you got to stay in. We need to talk about, what your dad is talking, like what your dad talked to you about and stuff. And she leaves and she's like, Rachel, make sure your sisters get on the bus this morning. At this point, I realized that the dad storyline is a little bit like the Alamist offer, for Rachel at least. For Rachel, her dad is offering to take her away and she can give up the fight and have like a new start and like kind of put everything behind her. And the Alamist is offering the same, but for everyone. And I think the Alamist offer is a little bit better, but they're both not great choices. So Rachel gets in the shower and starts taking a shower, and she just starts remembering all the night before, her as a bear, Tobias as a human, them getting like swallowed up by a taxon. One of her sisters is like, Rachel, you're taking a long time in the shower. And she's just like, you two make sure you get on the bus. I'm running late. I'll catch up later. So she skips school for the first time ever and just watches junk TV all day. And she's like totally having like PTSD though. Images and flashbacks of like the day before. So things from her dad, things from the Yeerk pool, the people frozen in time, the looks of terror on the people as they're frozen, the elements, all of that stuff. So she made her lunch and turned on the news, and her dad was on there, and he's a news anchor, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. And she just got sick to her stomach and just threw her sandwich away and turned the TV off because her dad was talking like, soon I'm not going to be here anymore. I'm moving away to a bigger, better opportunity. And she just is like, can't deal with it. I'm not hungry. So she goes back to her room, morphs into an eagle, and flies out the window. And how nice would it be to just fly away from all your problems? Could you imagine if they were adults when this was made? Imagine if they were adults and they had those types of responsibilities, like not just school. Like, what if they had a kid to take care of and an alien invasion war to fight? I don't know. I can see at that point how being a collaborator might be a little bit appealing. Like, you just don't have to deal with any of that, you know? Just give up your free will and you sort of get to keep existing. But then again, I have a really big tendency to be like anti-authoritarian. And so like, I don't think I would I don't think I would go for that. I'm a little bit of a rebel myself. That afternoon, they all meet at headquarters, and Axe doesn't usually meet because he would have to morph into human. So Rachel comes in her morphing outfit, and they're all like, And Cassie was like, you weren't at school today. And Rachel's like, I just wasn't feeling good. Tobias is like, I saw an eagle flying around a bit at noon and acting a little bit less eagerly than others. And Marco is like, okay, so you felt good enough to morph over here after being an eagle first? I think that's enough of that. Rachel is perturbed, and she's like, it's nice to know I have some privacy. And Jake is upset because she got the bear morph on her own, and she's being really reckless and putting them all in danger because, like, that's a new morph. We just talked about this in, like, the previous books. Like, no more morphing alone that, you know, like, don't know what's going to happen when you morph type thing. So everyone's getting upset with each other, and they're all on edge. And Rachel's like, it's not like it matters. You heard the Elemist. We're all doomed. And Jake is like, do you think I have all the answers? And, like, everyone is, like, getting upset. And finally, Rachel is like, my dad is asking me if I want to move away with him. And he's moving away. All of this feels strongly to me, by the way. I relate to this strongly. Like, constantly struggling, constantly trying to survive, being just worn down little by little. Like, how much willpower can you have to keep going the way that you are, you know? And I felt this way because of dysphoria before transition. And I felt this way about, like, things because ADD and autism probably, or PTSD or something, you know, just like life. Just trying to cope with things, and everything just keeps piling up, and there's no answers, and, like, you just got to keep making it or you're going to drown. Okay, that's me, by the way. I have some trauma that I need to work through. Based on the book, The Body Keeps the Score, I have found, which I would highly recommend. And it really opened my eyes, and I related to a lot in it. And I could talk about that so much. But we're talking about Animorphs here. So that could not be about trauma and stuff. Well, just child soldiers fighting an alien war with a little bit of teen drama on top. Nothing strange about that. They're all quiet for a bit, and eventually Rachel starts breaking down, and she's like, I'm scared. And Marco is like, but you're supposed to be the strong one. And Rachel's like, no, I don't want to be the strong one. She's like, I'm doing what I have to, and I see a lot of exits, and they're all looking really good right about now. I forgot to mention, but the Elemist said last time before he left that they don't have to choose now, regardless of what they choose, but he'll come back and ask them later. If they choose no, he'll ask them one more time in the future. So he can't tell the future, or he would have known that they would live. But he said, like, if you live, I'll ask you again later. At this point, Marco is like, when he comes and asks again, I'm changing my vote. And Jake's like, what? And Marco's like, if Rachel's breaking down, what chance do the rest of us have? And Cassie is like, see the scar I got from this raccoon that I was saving? And I think that she's like trying to convince them, like, the raccoon didn't know it was being saved. It was just, you know, doing what came natural, like resisting. But I was trying to save it. It would have died otherwise. That's maybe what we're doing here. We're like flailing, trying to like survive, but we're actually in need of help. That kind of a thing. But that is still not convincing to Jake. He is like, no way. We've got to keep fighting. And I find it really interesting because Jake is like the reluctant leader, but he's also the one that like wants to keep going. They're all running on fumes, but he still doesn't want to give up. I think that this is in like really super contrast to the Yeerk in the last book that would just totally happily give up in the face of like the inevitable. And I wonder if like maybe that's part of why he is against giving up. Like he knows what happens if they do and let the rest of the humans get controlled. He's had firsthand experience with that. And like the rest of them have no idea and may be willing to sacrifice all the rest of humanity. But Jake is like, I know what that's like, and I'm not going to let that happen to anybody if I can help it. So with Marco swapping his votes, Rachel is the tiebreaker now. And just as she's thinking it over, the Elemist is like, I'm back. back, and I'm going to show you what you need to understand this. All of them, including Tobias as a human and Axe, are transported to a field with some buildings in ruins in the distance. And they're all like, y'all heard that voice, right? And then they realize that like one of those buildings is the school they can recognize. And they figure that maybe this is a vision of the future that the Alchemist is showing them. Like, this is how it would all end up if they say no. The sky is yellowish and weird. Didn't elaborate on that. There's a weird smell in the air. Didn't elaborate on that. And Axe says that time feels distorted. No elaborations there either. So maybe they are in the future? Instead of just seeing like a potential future, maybe they are actually in it. But that doesn't add up to me. If the future's foregone, then the choice has already been made, and time travel is making things all kinds of messed up. I don't want to think about it. So they don't know what to do, but they decide that like maybe we should just walk around and explore, and there's got to be a reason we're here, right? So they start walking towards the mall, where they think the mall is going to be. And they walk past the school. They see giant holes in it. There's a skeleton in one of the classrooms. There's no cars on the road except for like a couple burnt up ones with a skeleton in them as well. Very apocalypse, very upsetting. In the far distance, they see a tube that's going up miles and miles, transporting things up and away. And, well, Axe can see this. The others don't have good vision because they just have those regular old human eyes. So Axe is telling them that he can see people or things going up that tube. They're moving at 300 or 400 of your miles per hour. And Marco's like, they're everyone's miles. And Axe is like, what about people who use kilometers? See, I'm learning. That doesn't amount to much, but I thought it was kind of interesting that Axe is learning and he's being a little bit sassy now. So they reach the mall and they find it transformed with a whole bunch of 6 foot across holes in it, with taxons filing in and out in all directions, like going to and fro like it's a big old anthill, but for taxons, a taxon hill. So they've made it into a taxon hive, actually. I'm not sure why, but okay, they did it. Somebody's like, should we keep clear of these taxons? And then they're like, nah, the only humans left are controllers, so we're controllers, aren't we? They assume that the Alchemist didn't bring them there to be killed. So Axe morphs into humans to better blend in, because just because there's humans doesn't mean there's Andalites. And they made their way towards the transport tube and got onto it. And it's described as an open air platform with seats for humans and space for taxons and seats for Hork-Bajir, mostly human seats. They just take some, they don't look out of place. So about a minute later, they get off the platform and they're downtown. There, they see all the buildings turned into taxon hives, and there's human Hork-Bajir walking the streets, but not like in a crowded way with a lot of people, just like, you know, a few here and there. They turn a corner around a building, and the entire stadium and all the buildings around it are just gone. And in its place is a gigantic Yeerk pool, 3 or 4 times bigger than a football field. And there's cages filled with people all along the perimeter, just like the pool from last time. But this time, the people aren't pleading for help because the planet's already taken over. It's already too late. There's nobody that's going to come help. So they're all just in very dire straits and terrified and crying and stuff like that. But nobody's actually asking for help. So while they're in awe of this big old Yeerk pool, a woman goes rushing past and... Oh, I didn't mention... One of the buildings downtown also had a giant dome over the top of it. Instead of the top 2 floors, it had a big old dome on it. And they're like, well, that's kind of weird. The rest of them being taxon hives. A woman goes rushing past Rachel and bumps into her. And Rachel's like, rude. And the woman's all, who are you? Are you spies? And Tobias is like, her name isn't your concern. His is. This is Visser 3. And Axe is like, oh, I see what's going on here, and starts to unmorph. And the woman is like, but only Visser 1 has an Andalite body. And they're like, well, he was Visser 3 when we were all comrades in arms. And the woman is like, I didn't know that you were visiting Earth, Visser. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. And Axe is just like trying to play the part. And he's like, you were right to be vigilant. If you hadn't questioned it, I would have had you killed. Get out of here. And so she does. She gets out of here. Of course, they're all being stared at by everyone because now there's an Andalite, but like no one is questioning it. But they figure they should get on the move fast because word's probably going to spread pretty quickly that, Visser's here. They figure that the Alchemist is probably going to keep them there until they can figure out whatever they're meant to like learn from being in the future like this. But Cassie is feeling like there's something else going on here, like there's something else that they're supposed to see. And I wonder if she's going to see them in the future as controllers or something like that. Like they would have to take the deal or they would be turned into controllers. So while they're all like just kind of walking along a little bit more, a bug fighter comes down. So they all start going towards the bug fighter that's descended. And out of the bug fighter, Visser 3 steps out. And people realize at that point that Axe is an imposter. And with the Visser is older Rachel, maybe like 9 or 10 years older than current Rachel. And the Visser is like, yeah, just as you said, here you are. And Rachel is like, hello, Rachel. And the other Rachel's like, hi, Rachel. And the older Rachel and the Visser start going on about how they knew they would be here because she was younger Rachel once. And this all happened. And clearly they made the wrong choice and humans got taken over. And the Visser is going on about how the Ellimist brought 5 humans and an Andalite to see the future. So they all start talking about how like, well, maybe we'll make a different choice and then there will be a different future. Unless whatever they see here is why they made the choice that they did and they can't actually affect the future at all. The Visser is like, I don't know how the Ellimist keeps it all together. And past Rachel is like, well, if we leave, this can't happen. So we'll just take the deal and this can't happen. But older Rachel doesn't even flinch. So whatever like she was bluffing at, if she was bluffing, didn't have an effect. Also, I wrote down that all of this has like a weird tone to it. Like there's something like just hiding under the surface. And I think that the Ellimist, at this point, I'm thinking that the Ellimist is like manipulating them and like this whole thing is not actually really the future. Cassie says that they should all get out of here. And as she turns to run, she trips and knocks Rachel over. And the older Rachel grabs her. But Axe put his tail at older Rachel's throat. And everything's really tense. And older Rachel's looking at the Visser. And he's looking at her. That's when younger Rachel, is like, hey, wait a minute. Why would you say that there's 6 humans when if you're from the future, Axe isn't a human. You would have been expecting 5 humans, like, and an Andalite. I think something's going on here. And so Visser starts taunting them and saying that they were all captured and they ate Tobias with barbecue sauce. And they all start to morph, figuring that they can't be harmed or the future would be changed. But they could harm him and nothing would change. So Rachel morphs into a bear. Rachel tries to hit Visser with her bare hand, but she ends up just slapping a tree instead. And they're all back at the woods and behind Cassie's farm. And they're frustrated that they didn't get the chance to hurt Visser. And Rachel changes her vote to leave. And Tobias too. And Jake. They all agree to go and nothing happens. So they're like, I thought we were supposed to be whisked away here. Cut to next day, they all just go to school. Rachel is spacing out in history class. The history teacher is teaching about World War II and talking about how if only the US had fought in the war instead of like trying to find peace, maybe they could have saved more people. And you can't second guess history after all. And Cassie speaks up and she's like, why can't you? And I at this point, I'm like, there definitely got to be in like the Ellimist, like some sort of trick where like everything is like shenanigans, right? But we'll see. And so Cassie's like, what do you mean? Why can't you second guess history? And the teacher's like, because of the butterfly effect. And she explains the butterfly effect because this is the 90s. That movie wasn't out yet. The teacher's talking about the butterfly effect. And she's like, when a butterfly beats its wings and it causes a tsunami over here. And she stares directly at Rachel and multiple times goes, a single butterfly, a single butterfly. Like saying like a single butterfly beating its wings. The bell rings and Cassie and Rachel get out of there and they're like, okay, that was really weird, right? Strange. And so they're like, what is the Ellimist playing at? Like, he can't interfere. He shows up when we're about to die, shows us the drop shaft as a way to escape, then shows us the future is like toast. How is none of that intervening or like forcing their hand? And Rachel's like, how would I know what to change to make the butterfly wings beat? to make a tsunami in the future, basically. How would I know what to change to affect all these cascading changes that we need? Cut to next night, Rachel's dreaming, and she's having dreams about all the dialogue from the book so far, butterflies, Cassie's words about the drop shaft, and at one point, I didn't even remember it. I didn't even write it down before this. Axe saying that the Kandrona is like a religion to the Yeerks. So she wakes up to an epiphany in the morning, as one is wont to do. She leaves her mom a note that she's going out. Maybe she'll be at Cassie's later. Very considerate. She morphs into an owl and flies over and gets Tobias and tells him to follow her to Cassie's house. It's still like early morning at this point. He's like, what's going on? He thinks she's nuts, but she's like, I know where the Kandrona is, and we're going to change history. Or change the future, I guess. So they all get to headquarters. Marco makes a joke about how it's 3:47 in the morning, and he's here because he's really lucky that his dad sleeps super deep and didn't hear him screaming when an owl and a hawk flew into his window. And I actually laughed really hard at that. Occasionally, Marco's jokes land for me. So Rachel is like, I figured it all out, you guys. The elements can't interfere, but he showed us the drop shaft. He showed us, like, he's been showing us the clues that we need to change things or, like, to survive as we need them. He didn't take them off planet because he wants a different answer. He wants to save the Earth, not just the humans. He wants to save the whole Earth. But he can't tell them that, and he can't do anything about that, so he's just dropping hints. Sort of a malicious compliance type thing. And Rachel says when they saw the future, they could see where the Yeerks put the Kandrona. That big building with the dome on top of it, it's probably in there. But in the current time, there's no dome there, so it's probably on the top floor of the building, just hidden away. At 5 in the morning, they all go down to the big building downtown. They morph outside of it, and Tobias says that he can't see through the windows up there, but up at the top, he's flying around. But the air is hotter than it should be at a building such as this. And he's going to continue being the scout, and they can all do the rest of the mission. The rest of them, they're morphing into their battle morphs, and they're going to break into the building and incapacitate the guard. But they don't know if he's a controller or not. Marco goes first. Since he's a gorilla, he knocks on the glass, and the guard drew his gun, because America, and he says, get out of here. Is that the normal response to seeing a gorilla in a city? In America, maybe it is. Marco just thought speaks to the guy and says he was out at a masquerade ball and he's looking for Visitor 3 now. And the guard, of course, goes, and a light. And so now we know he is a controller. And so Marco breaks the glass with a punch and also hits the guard at the same time. I was imagining like an office building with like glass doors in the front and then like a guard at a desk farther back. But this might be like a guard in a shack type situation. The guard is down. They file in, they break into the building, get the mission going on. They figure they can't use the regular elevator because remember, gorillas and tigers and bears, oh my. And they can use the freight elevator. Very clever. I did not think of that. I did not realize that a freight elevator was a thing that would exist. Rachel, Marco, and Jake go first, with Cassie and Axe following later in another elevator. They take out the 2 Hork-Bajir guards that were at the top when they got there, and all the human guards ran off. Jake got a good cut from one of the Hork-Bajir, though, so he's losing lots of blood. Rachel busts down a steel door at the end of the hall, and inside there's 8 more Hork-Bajir. So behind the door, there was 8 more Hork-Bajir. Rachel charged at them, thinking that they were just humans, because her bare eyesight was not very good. And the rest of them thought that she was being really brave, but like, no. Bare, poor eyesight. She thought they were regular humans until she got on them, and then she's like, oh crap, now we're in battle. It's a really intense battle. Everyone's getting hurt. They take out 4 of the Hork-Bajir, one of them flying out the window, and the rest of them flee when Tobias comes in through the window, kind of turning the tide. Marco puts the steel door back in place, puts a desk in front of it, all of them unmorphed to like stop from bleeding out. And so the gang is all here. I'm still thinking this is somehow an Elemis trick. I don't know how, but it's not. Once they're all regrouped, they go through the other door, the only other door in the room, and there it was. A big machine, a cylinder that is tapered and giving off electricity. The Kandrona. I wish I could make this like the Toy Story aliens.
The Kandrona.
Rachel morphs into an elephant and pushes it out the window, and it smashes down 60 floors down and smashes on the ground. Tobias made sure that nobody was standing down there, obviously. And they're all like, well, did we do it? Was that enough? And the Elemist says, that's not really enough. The Yeerks already have a second Kandrona on the way, and it's going to be here in 3 weeks. And everyone's like, well, that sucks. But Axe is like, no, this is a big blow. Like 3 weeks is a long time. It's going to set the Yeerks back. And so they all morph into birds and fly away. And Rachel says that she didn't see it at first, but it was a huge blow to the Yeerks. They found out later on, and they'll tell that in another story. And the book ends with Rachel going to her dad's house and helping him pack the last of his stuff. And he says he'll miss her, and she sees him off into a cab. And then she like morphs into a bird and flies away. That was the end of the book. My final thoughts. I don't know if I like this Elemist character so much. Once you add in like time travel and like freezing time and all that kind of stuff, like, but also like he reminds me of like the Watcher from Marvel in a way, or like something like that, where like he just is a passive observer, but like what good does that do to have him in the story then? The battles in this book and the effects of the invasion takeover, really hard hitting, really, really bleak. It was interesting seeing Rachel be the one to tell this story as well, because like she's usually the tough and brave one, but even in this book, like she's ready to give up. And like I think it's interesting that like they had her tell the story. Like how would this change if it was told from somebody else's perspective? It's also really convenient that the Yeerks didn't have the Kandrona on a floor that needed like a special key card or anything like that. Overall, it was a good story. I would like to learn more about how it impacted the Yeerk operations, them destroying the Kandrona, but I'm sure we'll learn that later. But like, did the Yeerks slowly starve out in some places? Did they realize like immediately that the Kandrona was ruined? Did it affect the Yeerks that were in the pool currently? Let's say they can't keep all the hosts that they have. All the controllers can't stay. I'll make up a number. Say they lose 50% of their controllers. What happens to the other 50%? Do they keep them in cages knowing that they're going to have the fugue happen? They can't have those people going out and being like, hey, there's an alien invasion happening, right? But also, are they going to like, how are they going to explain those people disappearing for weeks? Otherwise, you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm curious to see where that goes. Maybe it'll be explained. Maybe it won't be. Oh, when I had talked about like if a different character had talked about this book, like if it was Jake talking about it, would we have gotten a different view of like why he doesn't want to give up and like stuff like that? What are your thoughts? Leave me a comment. Let me know the things you liked, didn't like, think I missed, or would like to know in the future. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe. You know, makes the numbers go up. That's a good thing for me. And you won't miss the next video. See you next time. Bye.